Hey fellas, I'm excited to start a new series today. We're going to talk about some problems, systems, applications in the world, which are very intriguing, and it would be fun to peek under the hood to see how these might work, right? So we're going to look at how things like Google search work, how recommendation systems work, how curation systems work, how dating apps work, how the LinkedIn um, recommendation system might work, things like how the airline industry operates in terms of being able to solve a huge logistical problem. Things like um, the internet, when you click on the website, you see that website instantaneously. How does that happen? How does a how does the Spotify algorithm work, right? Where you get these song recommendations which are perfectly suited to your taste. Or another aspect of it being that when you click on the song, you hear that, you can listen to that song instantaneously, right? How does that work? What's the magic behind it? So you're going to look at different aspects of the world, which are exciting to unravel, and we're going to do that. We're going to start us off with we can start us off with recommendation systems, which is something where I've done a lot of thinking around them. Most of the things I was building, Curato, I've got the YC video, the YC application video for that. It's something I'm still going to work on. I think I'm going to actually add it to Elinity, but the goal of that was that you create this system. You can call it an AI, and obviously I was a huge part of it. But think of it this way, right? There's so much information out in the world. We want to connect with people. We want to go to a restaurant. Want to read a paper. We want to read a blog. We want to read a book. We want to read a poem. We want to read we want to do stuff in the world, right? But it's just we're inundated with the amount with insane amounts of things to do, people to speak with, and things to consume, right? So the way to think about this is a huge problem. It's just getting worse and worse. The way that you solve this problem, because again, one of the biggest determinants of a quality of life is the things that you interact with, right? So the books you read, the music you listen to, the people that you interact with, the people you meet, etc. Right? So this is a fundamental problem to human existence. It's almost as fundamental as any other problem, right? We didn't have this problem back in the 18th century, where there were only a handful of great books, and you could rush through them in a matter of a few years, right? Um, but now we're just inundated with great stuff, great books, great poems, great songs, great whatever you want to do in life, right? Like you're gonna find a range of options. So the problem that we are trying to solve here with recommendation systems are we are creating these intelligent filters that send stuff to you that's optimally suited to you, that's the best fit for you, right? Initially, as I mentioned, with Curata, I was working on creating a filter, creating a recommendation engine for materials, so books, textbooks, papers, videos, so what else? But chiefly those kinds of things, right? Now, I've actually focused my attention on the best people finding recommendation system, and which is what makes this doubly exciting. Yeah, as I'm building something in real time, I've been working on this for the last 6 months, where I'm building this best fit people connection tool or platform. So so let's talk about that, right? When you want to find a new person, now generally speaking, people find people for three chief things, right? One are the number one, we got romantic relationships, right? People want to find that, and over here, people's standards are the highest. Um, in the fact that most relationships end up not working out, most marriages end up not working. Well, forget about marriages, but most relationships end up not working out because people have got this picture of a romantic relationship, the perfect romantic relationship can be, right? And most people, I mean, 99 point, I don't know, percent of people fall short of those expectations. Part of it is, we are grappling with our own flaws, our own inadequacies, our own baggages, and our own egos. But part of it is not being able to find a person that would be the best puzzle fit for you, right? So the way I think about this, framework I've used, well, I actually wrote some blog posts about this framework, is that yeah, very complex puzzle pieces, right? We are not on 2 dimensions. You can think of us as a puzzle piece on n dimensions. Now, when you talk of romantic relationships, you're gonna find someone who best fits you on all these dimensions, right? No one's going to fit you perfectly. There's no such thing as a perfect match. And that is one of the things which keeps people from being happy, from being able to create relationships which would be beyond the realms of acceptability, right? Which might even be thriving relationships. But you don't need a perfect relationship. You basically, you're gonna think of it this, right? If you rank out everyone on the planet in terms of a compatibility score, that would be someone at the top, right? So this person would be the best fit for your particular puzzle piece. And what we're gonna do for romantic relationships is being able to, find, being able to short circuit that process, being able to accelerate that process of helping people find that best match, right? Another main source of another main reason for people finding this is not very active per se, and even the last one, right? It wasn't really very active back in the day where you would go to a church and you'd find someone like-minded, etc., right? Now people actually look for these, and that's why dating apps have become a humongous thing, right? When you look at, I was looking at this study which looked at how people find their romantic partners. Obviously, before 1980, dating apps were at zero. Most people used to find other people through three sources. One was churches, one was family and friends, and another one was, yeah, I think those are the two big ones, right? And then obviously the society has evolved, the modern landscape has evolved, and now we're at 70% of American couples have found a partner through dating apps, right? So they've obviously become huge, well, the main way to find people. Another huge portion of our social life is occupied by friends, right? People you love to hang out with, people you love to talk about all sorts of stuff with. If you're into sports, you go watch a sports game with them, right? People that are fun to be with, right? Now, with this category, we don't have too many apps, which I don't know, I haven't looked at this particular app landscape, but I don't think there are too many apps because there are a few reasons. One of them is people don't make new friends after a certain age. Most of the friendships that are built have been built by the age of 22 whilst you're in your college, 22, 24, right? And it's difficult to build adult friendships for all sorts of societal reasons, like people are busy, once people have a family, obviously their priorities shift, etc., right? But friendships are one of the enduring sources of happiness and meaning in life. Um, Another factor about this, another thing I'd like to state about this is that it's pretty unlikely that, because people evolve, right? It's pretty unlikely that you would have found your best fit people, your best fit friends before the age of 22, because you're still going to, before the age of 20, right? When you're still going to undergo rapid, significant changes in your personality and your values, right? So, yeah, and again, this is borne out by statistics. A lot of people don't have great friendships. Right, so that's another category of people that you'd love to find. And another category, the third major category, is what I'd like to bucket as work. Right, so these are people that you'd love to work with, maybe as co-founders, maybe as a creative collaborator, right? Let's say you're into music, you'd love to, start a band, or let's say you are into nature conservation, you'd love to find someone who can join you on a mission, right? So people work, when I use work, I mean it's very broadly. I mean it's in the sense of not how most people use it, which is that I go to this place and I get paid for it. I do these things, I get paid for it. I mean it's in the sense that there are certain things that you want to do in life, right? So there are certain social things, and there are certain things that you want to see in the world, that you want to experience. It could be hobbies, etc. And I put bracket all these things under work, right? Obviously, there are certain things like, let's say you're a mountain climber and you want to do 7 summits challenge in 7 months, right? And you would love to find a climbing partner because doing this on your own is, well, beyond suicidal, right? So, sure, you can. Again, I'd put that in under that bracket, right? So that's the third category of people. Now, we do with dating apps, which is the dominant form of people finding algorithms and applications on the internet. There are two major kinds of paradigms. So one is the photo-based paradigm, and the other is the personality-based paradigm, right? So the biggest example of obviously the photo-based paradigm is Tinder. Nothing even comes closer. Well, a few apps which come closer, like um, I don't, I think Bumble and Hinge might be two which come closer. The way that these photo-based applications work is that everyone has an objective attractiveness score, and this score comes from a rating system, the ELO rating system, which has been predominantly used in sports like chess, where you had two people. Let me simply describe this, right? You've got two people. When you start your journey on this app, you got the default score, could be 1,000. Um, if you're matched with someone, meaning mutually matched, right? If you're mutually matched with someone who's been using the app for a long time, and they are seen to be attractive in the sense that they get a lot of likes and matches, then your score is going to shoot up substantially, right? And if you don't get a ton of, if you send a lot of likes, you don't get a ton of response, then your score is going to go down, right? So your score is creatively going to either improve or decrease, and you're going to probably reach an equilibrium level depending on how attractive you are according to the hive mind, call it that, right? So again, to simplify this, the way this would work is that the more likes you receive, not likes, I think the term for that is right swipes, yeah. The more right swipes you receive, the higher score goes, and the more you're rejected in a way, in the sense that you send these right swipes or you swipe right for someone, but that person doesn't swipe right for you, your score decreases, right? And that decreases in proportion to the person who rejected you, right? So if someone who has a similar lower score on the ELOS rating declines your invitation to connect, then your score is not going to decline by as much as your score would decline. But if someone who's super attractive, according to this ELO rating, likes you, right, or matches with you, and vice versa, right? If someone who's super attractive, who's got a high ELO score, matches with you, so when I say super attractive, I mean there are obviously certain objective standards and that people perceive, like, if you got a bunch of people together, let's say 1,000 men within the ages of 20 to 30, and if you got, I mean, hot or not was based on this, right? And then you ask them to rank order, let's say 100 photos of women, then you'd probably see a consensus, right? And that's why there are things like actresses, there are things like advertising, where obviously attractive people are showcased, right? Because there is a consensus around what is attractive. Now, obviously, there's no, like, you can always find exceptions, but again, this is about consensus, right? This is about the majorities. So, for example, I don't know, pick any actress who is super popular, right? She'd probably find 99% of people would be like, yeah, she looks really stunning. And then 1% of people would be like, yeah, nah, doesn't do anything for me, right? So, obviously, there are going to be exceptions. But the general case is that if you got a bunch of people together, they would arrive at some consensus. So, how did this system work? How does the ELO system work in terms of recommendations? You would get shown people who have a similar ELO score as you, right? So if you're super attractive, you get a lot of likes, right swipes rather, then you're going to also in the future get recommendations from people who got a high ELO score, right? So what they want to do is, and this is something that we observe in human mating dynamics, that attractive people want to mate with attractive people. This is something that has been, I mean, it's intuitive, but it's also, loads of studies have been done on this. So ELO score is a way to arrive at that dynamic, right? And it works pretty well, considering the fact that, well, works well, I said works well. I need to obviously the huge asterisks around it that we can talk about in some other conversation. Works well in the sense that there are, I think, 1 billion matches a day. I'm not sure if that's statistic. Give me a second. Right. So there are no numbers on the internet, but we can make some educated guesses, right? So some of the numbers which are relevant are that in 2014, which is 10 years ago, they had 12 million matches per day. And since then, the user count has grown substantially by a factor of, I think, 3-4x. And engagement has gone up substantially, right? People probably spent less time on the app back then because the interface wasn't as addictive, it wasn't as colorful, it wasn't as dopamine generating, right? Dopamine hitting. So now, obviously, those things have changed. Now, we've got around. I mean, I find these numbers smaller than what I would have expected. 75 million per month, monthly active users. Let me see. Okay, we'll have to work with those numbers. Those are the best numbers we've got. Right, 75 million monthly active users. Let us say that half of those users use the app every day. So is half alright? I think half works, right? Right, so let's say 40 million, right? With 40 million, let us say that each user swipes right on 20 people. I mean, people swipe right very fast. People swipe very fast, right? So it probably is 100. Of those 100, so every day you're getting 40 million, 4 billion swipes. And assuming a mutual match rate, a mutual swipe rate of 1%, let's say 400 million swipes a day. Yeah, somewhere in the ballpark. I don't think that's incredulous because we had what, 12 million in 24. Yeah, I don't think that the jump would be so substantial. It could be. Anyways, look, this is not the point, right? The point is that, what's the point? God, I need to stay focused. What was the point? Right. Yeah, the reason this algorithm is devised to be this is that it really wants to hone in on your, on the part of on your primal brain, right? Which is like, oh, I see an attractive person, I want to mate, right? That as a very primal, very basal level of our brain, and Tinder caters to that part, right? It doesn't care about values, doesn't care about beliefs, doesn't care about personalities, doesn't care about any of that. It cares about whether the two people mutually like each other, and that is pretty much it, right? And this also informs the kind of the user base that we've got on Tinder, which is people who it used to be known as a hookup app, people who use it for, just casual relationships, one night stands, friends with benefits, things of that nature, right? Because when you're engaging in the pure physical acts, you don't really, most people don't really care about whether that person shares their values or their beliefs about the world, right? So that is the case with Tinder, where the paradigm of this is, very much focused on photos, very much focused on appearance, and yeah, everything else flows from that. Well, apparently they didn't use it anymore because they received a lot of backlash. I'm not sure about if they would have replaced it. Which do we want to surmise what they might have replaced it with? I guess we can, but let's do that real quick. Actually, let us not, because there's still so much of this conversation left, and I don't want to spend any more time on this because there's like 2 entire pages of notes that we need to discuss, and we're already 20 minutes in. Right. So another paradigm, the second paradigm, dominant paradigm, and there are mostly 2 paradigms, right? There's no third paradigm. The third paradigm would be somewhere in the middle. So you can think of these as the polar opposites. So one is the photo-based paradigm, attractiveness-based paradigm, appearance-based paradigm rather, and the other is the personality-based paradigm. So the whole being, your whole self, right? Are these 2 selves compatible? And then you maybe add, because obviously there's physical compatibility, so you also use that as a factor, but you don't use it as a predominant factor. Is as one of the things, right? So, the extreme end from the appearance base would be purely non-appearance based, but I don't think that would work at all. Like, unless someone is interested in an asexual, aromantic relationship, I don't think that would work, right? Because humans are very visual creatures. We're very, yeah, we're very appearance-driven creatures. So even if you were to find an intellectual who wouldn't give a damn, they would still, on some level, right? You can always find exceptions, but I don't think. Well, I think I would be confident making that statement. An app which is exactly on the opposite side of the purely appearance-based paradigm, wouldn't be a dating app, right? It would be a friendship app, yeah, right? Because dating, obviously, there's a subtext of mating, sex, right? Physical relationships. So that for humans requires, oh, that for humans obviously requires that element of physical attraction, right? Yeah. So the second paradigm, which is not all the way because we're still dealing in the realm of dating apps, is the personality-based paradigm, right? Where I think OkCupid has been the most beloved example of that, where the way it used to work, I don't think it exists anymore, is that you'd have a ton of questions that you'd answer. Some would be numerical, like rate. I can't even think of any questions, but like, I'm just going to give an abstract example, right? Not a concrete one. So think of, the question would be that rate your affinity for this particular thing from 0 to 5, right? So that could be one type of question. Another could be that, would you agree with this statement? Would you disagree with this statement? Would you, yeah, not, there'd be range of questions, right? And then there'd be questions around what are you looking for in the person, in the opposite person, right? So it'd be like that. Over here, you could also obviously input your deal breakers. For example, if you're not into smoking and drinking and whatever, then that would remove all the people who might have been suggested to you. So this is obviously a level of filter. Over here would be the deal breaker filter, and for the rest, there would be scores. Now there are many ways to arrive at scores with questionnaires, and I haven't looked at the OkCupid algorithm. I don't even know if there's been any work done around that, trying to unravel how the algorithm works. So I'm going to try to arrive at it from first principles. If I was building OkCupid back in the day with the constraints I had, there's no LLMs, no natural language understanding, none of that, then what would I build, right? So transporting myself back to 2000, and I want to build something which allows people to connect based on their personality, allows people to connect with someone romantically, with personality being the predominant factor, right? So what would I do? I would obviously have a ton of questions. The more questions you have, the better the insight and the better the precision of and the accuracy of the model, right, of the recommendation system. What you want to do is, let's simplify this, right? Let's simplify this by saying that there are different categories of questions, and each of these would have to be dealt with differently. So if I wanted to simplify it, I could remove certain categories of questions, or what I could do is, okay, let me do this, right? So there are the number-based questions where you're giving a numerical answer, and over here what you do is you'd assign a score of. Another related point over here is that with Tinder, you get an objective score, right? That is not relative to the person that you're matching with. So that is one of the key components of that system. On the other hand, with OkCupid, you have a relative score, right? So you don't have an objective ELO score, you've got a relative score, and that relative score is generated when your profile is compared to another profile, which is considered as a potential match, right? So the way the system would work is that you over here, and then this profile is both of your profiles are compared and contrasted and analyzed, and if there's a high compatibility score, let's say there's a threshold that we set, then this person is obviously added to the queue of recommendations. If this person doesn't satisfy that compatibility score, it's rejected, right? And then you get a next one. and again, they either go in the queue or they get rejected outright, right? Um, yeah, and they could get rejected. If you want to improve the efficiency of the system, what you could do is that you'd have some deal breakers, and most people have deal breakers, and most people have strong preferences around certain things, right? So you could use these as the starting filters, and that would, concrete example over here would be that, let's say you want to have a family in the future and you only want to see people who are interested in having a family, right? So that's one of your filters. Now we can do a quick search, like we could use that as a top condition, right? Because over here we're dealing with conditionals, we're dealing with logic, right, at this top level. So I mean, in this recommendation system you are dealing pretty much with, give me a second. So where were we? I lost my train of thought because there's something that I think would be pretty interesting to talk about that we're going to get to in a couple of moments. So yeah, your approach would be that this approach, this OkCupid approach, is a completely deterministic approach. You are not dealing with any ML, you're not dealing with any complex, ML algorithms are not really complex, but you're dealing with a pretty succinct amount of code space, right? Same with Tinder, by the way. Yeah, and that actually got me thinking about how would you rebuild an AI-powered Tinder, in the sense, in the recommendation engine, right? So we're gonna get to that, where your photos are the main object of attention. And over here, when I say the word attention, I mean in the Transformers sense. But we're not going to use deep learning, so yeah, but let's see how that pans out, right? So we're going to, I don't have any notes, so we'll just have to figure it out on the go. Right. So, yeah, one approach could be that, you remove all the applications, all the candidates, and the way this might work is that oh, yeah, I forgot about this, right? With Tinder, obviously location is probably going to be the top level filter. Because again, you gotta have a stack. You don't, because that'd be very computationally expensive. Well, not massively expensive, but it'd be time consuming, right? You want to reduce the time it takes. And when you're doing this at scale for millions and tens and hundreds of millions of swipes or profiles, you want to obviously optimize every single part of it, right? So the top level optimization would be that you filter people out by location. Well, the level one would be by gender, right? Level 2 will be by location, right? You only want to see people who are within 20 miles of your range. Level 3 might be, for Tinder, level 3 might be, well, the kind of relationship you're looking for, right? So if you're looking for a one night stand or you're looking for a casual relationship, then probably it makes sense for you to only see those kinds of people, right? That for Tinder-esque apps or platforms, that might be one of the top level filters. For OkCupid, there are certain questions which are very important, which are more important than most questions, right? Like having a family, right? Future plans for a family, where you want to stay, those kinds of questions. So I think you'd probably put them at the top of that, but just below location and gender and what else? Yeah. So that's what you do. Now, once you've done that, what you do is for every profile that arrives in your queue to be analyzed, you compare all the questions because you probably haven't given answers to all the questions that you could have answered, right? So you've obviously got a limited subset of questions. And what you do is you pick some question randomly, and then you pick that question for that person, right? And then you analyze them. And if there's alignment or similarity, for some questions you are looking for similarity, and again, each question will have some metadata which speaks to that. Similarity, obviously, you're looking for, both of you are looking to build a family, both of you are looking to, what else, right? I can't think of too many things, but like, you know what I'm talking about. And then there's alignment, where you might not necessarily want that person to answer the same thing, but you want there to be some alignment. And there are questions where like questions around, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Because we don't have any established results that speak to one or either of these relationships being more optimal in terms of compatibility. Like there are obviously great many intro intro or extrovert relations, and obviously there are a great many introvert and extrovert relationships, right? And I haven't seen any literature which speaks to one or the other being more effective. So we can't use that as a score. It'd be like, sure, you can give an answer and that might be relevant in some other context, as for example, if that person is looking for someone outgoing, obviously that's an unconditional. But unless those things have been stipulated, there are certain aspects of this thing, of your answers, which might be irrelevant, right? But there are certain answers where you're looking for alignment. So what you do is, when you got similarity, you add a point, or if it's, for example, you're dealing with, so you got, let's say, a point-based answer, right? So over there, you do a fraction, right? So if, let's say, I probably should have come up with some examples beforehand. It's difficult for me to come up with examples because I'm just not very interested in that particular action of finding the best fit person for me at the moment. So it's very difficult for me to come up with the questions which might be relevant, which is silly when you think about it. But the fact is that I haven't thought too much about this particular subject, so that is where we find ourselves. Anyways, Jesus, it's 31 minutes. I need to go fast. We're going to do it all? I think we want to do it all. Right, so let us go fast, right? So you get the point, right? For each question, you add a score, and you also have another quantity, which we can call, for each question which is analyzed, you add a point to another quantity, which you can call as the dimensions eval, right? So all the different dimensions across which you have been analyzed. This is not dimensions in the sense that I used the word dimensions previously, but so I guess I would probably want to rename this to remove any chance of confusion, right? So, and then what you do is you arrive at a compatibility score by using these two numbers, right? So the total score, which you arrived at by looking at the similarity or alignment. So for each alignment or each similarity, you added a point, and then you also use the dimensions of eval for every single question, right? So even when you didn't see any similarity, there was alignment, and then there would have been cases where you probably want to add a negative point, right? Yeah. So you also do that. So the total points can also, the point can also be negative, but the dimensions eval will be increased by 1 for every point which has been analyzed, right? And then you obviously arrive at a percentage based on these two quantities, and that gives you a compatibility score. And what you do then is that you get a bunch of these profiles. Let's say you analyze 100 profiles every day, depending on the compute cost. You could do 1,000, you could do 1,000,000, you could do all in the database. But let's use the example of every single profile in the database, right? And then you get a compatibility score for each person, each profile, and then you rank order them, and then you show the highest profiles every single day, and then you're obviously going to reject most of those profiles, and hopefully on the 99th day you're going to find your person, right? So the reason that this doesn't work as well as you might expect is that questionnaires, they don't capture the nuance. Like, they're better than, obviously, like, they can be partially effective at capturing your personality, but there's just so much to you, so much complexity, so much nuance that just would not be captured by questionnaires. So that is the fundamental limit, right? Which limits the performance of these recommendation systems. Now, there's also, by the way, using this dimensions eval also takes care of the limited info problem, because you're not going to fill out all the questions, right? So even if you got like 10 questions that you answered, we can still give you some compatibility score. Obviously, the more the questions you answered, the better your the better the insight we have on you, the better the predictive power of this algorithm, right? I want to quickly talk about how we might go about building an AI ML powered recommendation system for Tinder, right? So purely focus on the photos or appearance paradigm. So what you could do is that you could over here, so this is just up, top of my head. One approach could be that you use Tinder the way you've used, right? So you had this user who's used Tinder for the longest time, and you know that these are the profiles they've rejected, so and these are the profiles they've liked, right? And there are such assumptions that you want to make that people focus 70% on the profile images, and maybe just 30% on the content, right? The bio. I mean, the bios on Tinder, they're absolutely ridiculous. There's no information in most of those bios. Most of them are completely stupid, but it works for people. So, well, a huge number of people, right? It doesn't work for a ton of people. That's why there's this huge disillusionment going around, and people talk of dating apps. People are just fed up with it, and this is obviously one of the big reasons, right? Because people are not even pretending that there's something deeper to attraction, right? And again, people are looking for different things. So I'm not different things float different people's boats. I'm not judging. I'm not making any snide comments on any of that. I'm just saying that approach, appearance-based approach, doesn't work for a whole ton of people who are very disillusioned with that approach, right? So anyways, if you were to double down on this, how would we do that? Like, I'm just focused on, like, you could incorporate AI ML in all sorts of different places, and Tinder has done that, right? Like, you can suggest the best photos to add, you can suggest it can help you in the profile creation aspect of it. Well, here I'm just focused on the images, right? So if you rejected a ton of people, and if you liked a ton of people, then we can train an image model on your preferences, right? So these are the types, these are the attributes that I don't think it would work very well. I mean, it might work for a certain segment of people who are very much into types. Like, if you're someone who, I don't know, I mean, there's not even a ton of information. Like, when we think of features for training an AI ML model, what features would be relevant if you're just looking at the face of a person, right? So the hair color, the eye color, obviously the facial structure. But it's not like that's such tiny differences, right? That you think of it this way. Think of someone that you deem is very attractive, and think of someone who you deem is average looking, right? Who's not got any facial deformities, who's symmetric, but who's not fat, who's very average looking, right? Like your next door neighbor or whatever. Now, you're not going to be able to pinpoint precisely what makes that person, that face, so much more attractive. And the reason for that is that it's the tiniest of differences which lead to massive impacts on how we perceive attractiveness, right? So I don't think an AI ML model could be very effective over here. I mean, we'd have to train one and see whether it works, but this would be the approach. How would we build an AI ML powered OkCupid? Again, you train a model based on the answers that you've given, and it then goes about finding people with similar answers, right? So instead of a deterministic use a probabilistic model, right? Jeez, I need to really. Now, I want to build the best. I want to talk about how you would build the best people finding algorithm, or rather system, from first principles, right? So best fit people finding or dating app, right? So what you want to do is, at the start, is take in as much information as possible. Personality, the likes, the dislikes, their beliefs, their values, their goals, their hopes, their desires, their fears, their anxieties, their ideal lifestyle, their ideal partner, through sources like questionnaires, through sources like chatting with a super intelligent AI, and that actually can serve, that the exercise can be very immersive, can be very engaging. It can also be an exercise in self-reflection, right? So it can be a win-win for the user. And then you can use all sorts of sources, right? Journals, blogs and other personal creations like videos that the user might have created, like what I'm doing over here, podcasts that the user might have gone on, Spotify playlists, the history across different applications that they use, like if they use apps like Twitter, um, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Right? So use history from all these different places, the like history, etc., comment history, YouTube, etc. Right? Spotify likes and playlists, etc. WhatsApp chats, all the different sources. You compile all this information, and you create a deep user persona. You create the model of that user, and now we've got with LLM, we can do that, right? You obviously can't do it to the degree that we can recreate a person, but we can do a pretty good job of recreating huge chunks of that person. So you do that. That's step one. Now, before you talk about the next step, I want to talk about the goals. This, what you want to do over here, when I talk of building this algorithm, talk of building this engine, I'm talking of solving the problem of helping you find your best fit people at the fastest rate, minimizing the time spent, and minimizing the recommendation iterations, right? So that's a level above, or a level below rather. Eventually, we want to get to a one-shot recommendation, which is that if you've got all the relevant info on the user, we should be able to find the best fit person with one shot, right? So you open the app for the first time, you're given all the relevant data, and the first person that you see, if you're looking for a romantic relationship, is a person that is the person of your dreams, right? Is your ideal person. And yeah, it would almost be like you're acting as a perfect matchmaker, like Cupid from heaven. That'd be the goal of such a system. We also would want to, so these are some meta goals or sub goals which would make the core goal more achievable, but if they're not necessary, right? So it could be like make the algorithm improvable with feedback, right? So with every single iteration, every single recommendation, we want the user to give feedback, and we want the model to get better by receiving this feedback, right? And every recommendation which has been suggested must also have intelligent context behind it. So let's say that I've been suggested this person, I need to know what the recommendation system thought this person was the right person. And yeah, so that'd be a useful thing to have. And it must obviously, the system must be intelligent, it must understand the context, it must be able to talk with the user. And in the current lingo, obviously that means LLM powered, right? So you got all that information. One way to think about this recommendation engine, this dating app, this people best fit people finding app, is that you got the inputs of all the profiles. You got, well, two different inputs, right? So all the profiles in the world which are on the app, and then from the other side you got all your information, right? All the data which is relevant to you, which is pretty much most of the data which, like, sure, there's a ton of data about you which might not be relevant. For example, the length of your fingernails or whatever, right? But obviously, I'm being flippant. There's loads of, you want to try to use all the relevant data. So those are the two inputs. Then there's the box. So this box basically is where all the processing happens, and the output from that processing is a profile. That is your best person, your ideal person, your best fit person, right? Now, when you think of this as a system, there's so many approaches to the box, right? The external, the inputs and the outputs are going to stay the same, which is that you want to put in, obviously, you want to have as many people as possible, and you want to give as much information as possible, because if you don't, then the performance of the box is going to be pretty bad. And then at the output, you want to have recommendations of the people, best fit people, right? So you'd want to have a limited number, and that number obviously would ideally want to converge to, I don't know if one would be the, like, if you build a perfect system, then obviously one, right? But if you haven't built a perfect system, then you still want to have a small number, but you don't want to get down to 10 or 20. You want to probably have, let's say, 100, right? That works within the margin of error. Now, there are many approaches to building the processing box. The approach that I'm using for Alinity is this particular approach. It's a weight-based approach, and there are certain unconditionals that we use at the top, certain deal breakers that allow us to do the top level filtering, right? So that's the top level. And then there are certain, for example, if you care about, having someone who's very outdoorsy, then you can assign a weight to that. If there are certain values which are very fundamental to you, assign a weight to that. So that weight-based approach, which I've never seen anywhere else, again, there are loads of exciting new things that we are doing. This is one of those things, right? So we use a weight-based approach where we assign a weight to the different things. It obviously requires a significant level of self-awareness that unfortunately is not present in everyone, but you work with what you got, right? So again, we roughly use the model, partial model that we talked about with OkCupid, where you got your profile, you use deal breakers and unconditionals to filter away a lot of the people with the top level filters, which would be simple filters, right? These are just simple conditionals. You're not using any any sophisticated AI algorithms over here. So that does away with maybe 90% of the profiles, and then obviously location does away with a ton of profiles. And then you're left with, let's say you live in a big city like New York or London, then you're left with, and let's say we've got 100 million people on the platform, you're probably going to be left with 50,000 people, right? And even then you can do it with a lot of people based on age ranges, based on all these top level filters, right? These can be, I don't think there's a science to, apart from obviously the top level filter being location and then probably 2 or 3 other top level filters, then the stack of filters below those filters, I don't think that there's any rigorous science to determining the order of those filters, right? Like you can have the filter of, do you want to have a family or not, in position 9, or you can have it in the position 19th, right? Because there'll be like 20 questions that are going to be, which are going to be the top level filters, right? So you go through those, and then you end up with, let's say, 10,000 profiles. And now, what you do is that you take each profile randomly, and again, depending on how we stack the architecture of the entire system, how we actually set up the pricing model, right? Like if it's a quick note on this, so if it's a pricing model where the user pays us upfront, it's not going to happen. I'm just using this as a very hypothetical example. They pay us, $200, right? Pay us based on results that we are going to deliver you the best fit person for you, and that obviously would take care of all the compute costs. So we would do all the iterations and analysis of all those remaining profiles in one batch, right? So that'd be one approach. And then once you've done that, then we would have people with the top compatibility score, and then we would show these to that person. Another approach, which is a more likely approach based on the cost and compute constraints, is that we do multiple batches, right? So every day we take 100 random profiles from those n number of profiles. It could be 100, it could be 50, depending on the compute cost, or it could be 20. And then you perform your analysis, right? So you perform your model analysis, you compare the models, and initially we are just going to use an LLM to see what works and what doesn't between these models. You're going to almost offload at this level, right? We obviously handled a lot of the other levels, but at this level, you're going to offload the matchmaking capabilities to our AI. Ideally, you would want to remove the AI, or you can still use its input in the ideal form factor, in the ideal product in the future, but you'd also want to build a more sophisticated algorithm based on, let's talk about this, right? So if we're building this without relying on, OpenAI's GPT-4's almost universal intelligence, we are obviously going to train our own model, so the particular model doesn't matter. But you also don't want to, I don't think it's wrong to upload it to a model, right? Because that model can understand nuance, can understand things that we otherwise would have to stipulate by hand. So I think that approach works pretty well, even in the ideal scenario. And the ideal scenario is where you can train your own model and where you can pretty much do it. You can make the algorithm as complex as you want, right? That we don't need to keep it simplified for the simplified MVP, right? So yeah, that's interesting. We'll obviously keep on touching upon this in the future and keep on revisiting this particular aspect, because as I mentioned, this is one approach. We are going to try a ton of different approaches, see what delivers the best results, but this would be one approach, right? And every day, so you analyze 20 profiles, and the top 3 or 5 profiles with the highest compatibility score, you show these to the person, right? You recommend these to the person. Now we could repurpose this particular tech, this particular system, for finding other relevant people. Let's say you want to start a project or a company, and you want to find someone who would be a great partner for that project, right? Based on your criteria, based on complementariness. So that'd be one thing. Another use case might be that you want to embark on an audacious research and development challenge. You want to build a product. You want to do a passion project of a substantial scale, right? And like ocean cleanup. There's this guy who's taken on the mantle of cleaning up the oceans from all the plastics which riddle it, which threaten so much wildlife. And let's say you want to start something of that sort for restoring rivers across some polluted cities, right? And you'd love to find someone who's like-minded, who's similarly driven. So that could be another use case. And another use case could be that you want to go on an epic adventure, like you want to do a road trip you want to do a biking trip rather, from cycling trip from the tip of North America to the tip of South America, right? From Alaska to Chile, right? And you would love to find someone who is similarly minded, who is constitutionally capable of doing that, and no one in your circle happens to fit the bill, right? And that actually is an important aspect that I brushed over. The reason that we want to build the best people finding algorithm is that our lives are limited in the sense that we only meet so many new people, right? Like, we only got a limited amount of time. That's sort of the mate finding problem, right? Where you want to find your ideal mate before you are people. Obviously, people want to start the family before a certain age. People have got different goals. Most people would say, a huge chunk of people would say they want to find the ideal mate before the age of 30, right? So you're operating with 12 years in which you want to find the ideal mate. Even if you're very social, if you're very active in your community, in your friends groups, you'd still not meet more than 10,000 people, 10,000 potential mates, candidates, right? So the odds of you finding your best fit person is pretty tiny. So creating the best people finding algorithm, the system, is an attempt to solve the randomness problem of life, right? And there's so many people where, if you met those people, it would add so much value to your life, right? I give you these examples, right? If you met someone who you could go on an epic adventure with, and you happen to know no one who's up for it, right? Think about all the ways in which your life is enriched. So that's what makes it exciting. And another use case might be that you got some esoteric and eclectic interests and would love to find someone that at the same level and who shares the same bandwidth as you to talk about these kinds of subjects, these kinds of questions, and these are things that wouldn't make sense or wouldn't appeal to most people, right? And it's funny that I didn't even notice this, but I was looking at different use cases of how this best fit people finding algorithm system might be used, and these are the first 4 use cases that I came up with. And what's interesting is, at some point in my life or another, or even now, these are applicable to me, right? Like, there are certain things I want to do. There's this, I don't want to talk too much about it, but there's this project I want to do which is very ambitious in its scale. I want to regenerate Earth's biodiversity. I want to restore Earth's biodiversity. And I'll get to that no matter what, but wouldn't it be fun if I found someone who's similarly driven by that desire, by that goal, by that mission, by that calling, right? Working with someone of that sort it would just enrich my life. It would make my life easier because it's going to be challenging. I'm going to have to take on the status quo. I'm going to have to take on special interests. I'm going to have to take on, well, capitalism in a way. No, yeah. So that's one example. And there's many things I want to do, like in terms of adventure. I want to do Seven Summits Challenge. I want to do the second Seven Summits Challenge. Loads of things I've got in my bucket list and my goal list. And for some of those things, I think it would be difficult to find people. But again, you probably want to have someone that you can do this with, right? For safety reasons, mostly, and also for companionship reasons, right? So again, that's an example. Then again, like, so I pretty much tick all these boxes. So yeah, my point with giving these use cases was that you can repurpose this core system, this core recommendation system, for helping you find people for these other use cases. So in case 1 and 2, it's more about complementariness. So the model could be tuned to weigh that more heavily. In case 3 and 4, it's about how much fun you would have, your intellectual compatibility. In case 4, your appetite for adventure, things of that nature, right? So there are certain specific things that you'd be looking for when you're looking for someone, and this is why we're building a natural language search, which is again very exciting. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that the potential of building something of this sort is so exciting, because you imagine the unlock, right? You're allowing people to find the best partner, right? They don't have to settle anymore. So that's obviously huge. The unlock just because of that is massive. Lots of people don't build families because they couldn't find the right person. They don't achieve true marital bliss or true bliss of a deep union because they couldn't find the right person, right? So if you could do that for more people, more and more people, like millions of people, think about the added happiness that you added to the world. Think about the well-being that you added to the world. Think about the life that you added to the world, right? Think about all the good things that you added to the world, because relationships at the end of the day, they are the treasure, they are the essence to a good life, a rich life, a beautiful life. They are, yeah, they're pretty much everything, right? Most people would say that, would say, unless obviously that, socially, there was personality disorders, so that's one category, and then the other extreme, you've got people who are obsessed with work, obsessed with their mission, and they don't care as much about relationships as they care about leaving behind a legacy. There are obviously, some philosophers, some scientists. I was watching a talk by this guy. Oh my gosh, that was such a good talk. I was talking about why, well, he was talking about Friedrich Nietzsche, and he was in particular, there's this section where he was talking about why philosophers don't marry, and it was very interesting that the short argument was that we want to leave something behind, right? So leave a part of us behind. Back in that time, you couldn't leave behind most people couldn't leave behind monuments, couldn't leave behind tech, we didn't have those things of that sort, right? So you could either leave behind children, your physical legacy, or you could leave behind ideas. And they want to leave behind ideas, and by not having, what on earth is that? Ouch. But not leaving behind, by not having a family, they obviously wouldn't have the distraction, one core component of it, but they'll also be more driven to leave behind ideas, right? Because, like leaving behind a legacy is something which drives some people to a huge degree, right? Even people like Elon Musk, people who've done great things in science and tech, leaving behind a legacy, leaving behind a huge, and I can relate to that desire to a large degree, right? I want to leave something behind. So yeah, if you don't have anything to leave behind in terms of your kids, you're going to be more driven to leave behind ideas, right? Great ideas. You're going to be more driven to come up with great ideas and to work on great ideas. So that was interesting, right? So apart from those two exceptions, obviously on two opposite spectrums, the greatest of humanity and the worst of, well, I wouldn't say the worst of humanity, but people who are not median, right? We're not in the median of humanity. We're not in the mass of humanity. Let's put it that way. Most people derive the greatest amount of joy, the greatest amount of happiness, the greatest amount of meaning from the relationships, right? So that would be a huge unlock. And then if you can add, being able to being able to build great friendships throughout the course of your life, not just, in your school days and your university days, but throughout the course of your life, even when you move to a new city or embark on a new challenge, a new adventure, being able to find your kinds of people. So you start a new passion project, you start a new creative project, being able to find your kinds of people, being able to find mentors. Lots of people want to give back, right? I mean, being able to connect people. There is it's such an exciting problem. The promise, the potential of being able to connect people, be it romantically, be it for friendships, be it for work, be it for passion projects, be it for creative collaborations, be it for mentors and coaches, etc. Right? I mean, the potential is so exciting, and that is the problem that I've chosen to work on, that I'm working on. Yeah, this is why this has been so much more exciting to talk about. It's 2 o'clock, but I still usually when it's 2 o'clock I can barely get a word out. But been on a good run today, and so I've got more energy in me today than it was just an hour ago. So I've still got remnants of the energy, and yeah, and then because I was like, okay, what do we talk about today? And I just realized that this is something that would be fun to talk about because it's so close to my heart, and it's so close to, well, it's not going to be the main thing that I'm going to be remembered for, but this is going to be the thing which starts off that journey, right, at a grand scale. So this is going to be a huge part of my life. When I look back at my life at the age of 80, this is going to be so like the unlock, the what this could do for people, for humanity. It would be massive. It'd be massive. And yeah, the promise of creating great recommendation engines is just, and creating, in particular in this case, people connecting platforms. Yeah. And a quick note on curation problems. Right, I've been working on curation problems since I've been in AI because that was the problem which I found the most exciting back in that time and for the last 2 3 years, right? As I told you, as I mentioned, I have worked on Curata, which was super exciting to work on and to think about and to problem solve for, where, like the promise of being able to connect us optimally with our best books, best fit books, people, papers, materials, videos, blogs, right? Like, exactly at precisely the moments that we want these things. This is something which is so exciting. So, yeah, it's like you want to feel, this particular problem satisfies all the conditions of what I wanted to work on, right? The scale, the amount of positive unlock for humanity, the amount of happiness that you can add to humanity, the what this means for you, right? Because if you can build this kind of a recommendation engine, like you can find your optimal sources of information, or even people for that matter, right? Quick notes on that before I leave. I actually thought of this as with most of the things I worked on. As with most of the things I worked on, I want these things to be motivated by something that I want to solve or I would use in the future, right? So with this one, for the longest time, I didn't want to have a relationship. I guess I was like those philosophers, not with their level of intellect, but just a desire. What I wanted to do, basically, for the first 23 years of my life, was to work on big problems, leave behind solutions to these big problems, and that be it, right? Leave behind big ideas, but mostly big, like platforms, so infrastructure, institutions. That's what I wanted to do. Well, it changed, right? Like when I was young, I wanted to just operate in the realm of ideas. Then I was like, no, I want to leave behind institutions, right? Companies, enterprise, syndicates, but a syndicate that would pretty much carry on my mission, carry on my goals, carry on my ideal world vision, right? So that's what I wanted to do for the first 23 years of my life. I still want to do that, don't get me wrong. And obviously the vision has become much more sophisticated. But another thing that I realized over the last many years now is that human relationships are beautiful, if you could, like, I want to have, like, there's love in my heart. There's so much love in my heart. I want to give that to, you know, my family, right? I want to, yeah, those seemingly, well, I mean, it is a kind of a mundane aspect of existence, having a family, raising a family, nurturing a family, those little moments. But there's just so much beauty in those ostensibly mundane moments. I mean, one could argue, and lots of people have actually written about this and talked about this, right? Those are the best, those small moments that you share with your partner, with your kids, where, funny enough, I was watching a clip, Elon Musk, and he was talking about, well, so he was on a podcast with this guy, and they were talking about the elections, and he was talking about, he had his son with him, to keep it very short, right? And his son was just, being such a annoyance, such a nuisance. But the way that particular dynamic, and then Elon was says to his son that mini me, you complete me, right? And I was so touched. It was such a beautiful. Oh gosh, I was like, oh, it was like, it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. But that's what I'm talking about, right? When I see those kinds of things in the world, I feel a certain way. That's the thing that now I can do it with those desires. Like, I can make a conscious decision that I don't want to have a family. I don't want to have that. And there are conditions, there are situations, there are scenarios where I wouldn't have a family, I wouldn't have a partner. I would be living the life of a lone wolf. That, yeah. So I'm perfectly happy with that existence too. But the optimal, if I were to paint the ideal picture, if I were to paint if I were to have a conversation with my 80-year-old self, and if my 80-year-old self asked me that, what would you want to have if you could have everything? A family would obviously be, like, I don't want it to be at the cost of work on my mission, and to the degree that to the extent that I want to work on my mission, and to the degree that I need to work on my mission, because I'm going to be fully devoted to it. But it's not going to be either or. I'm going to have to find a way to maximize both of those aspects of my being, my calling, my mission, my purpose on this planet, and obviously my love for my family, right? And my relationships, basically, with my family. So yeah, to cut it very short, I was like, yeah, I realized that I do want to find that kind of a person, or rather, I do want to build a family in the future. And that got me thinking about, obviously, wanting to share a beautiful life with a person that you love deeply. So not just having kids, but before you have kids, you obviously have a partner, right? And that, I was like, okay, so that's interesting. And then I realized that based on who I am, based on everything I know about myself, I don't like most people, in the sense that, no, like, I don't dislike most people either. That's not what I mean to say. It's like, it's very difficult for me to actually like someone, right? I'm very picky in the kinds of people I would want in my life, and I'm only going to get pickier still, because life is short. You don't want to spend time with people who are suboptimal in the interaction quality, and that's something that I've come to the conclusion a while ago, and that's something that's only going to, I'm not going to compromise with, because life is all about energy. It's all about the limited time you have, and what you do with that, you don't want to compromise, right, by having less than optimal energy in your life. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. Now, obviously, so many people out there who could be potential partners, but based on who you are, based on how most people are, it's going to be almost impossible for you to find your person, right? Statistically impossible in a real sense. So I was like, okay, if that's the case, any minute I spend in that pursuit is going to be a wasted minute. Because if the odds of you finding your partner, let's say, it take you statistically a million hours. A million hours, how much would that be? I say it'd take you 10 years of, spending an hour a day. Let's just use that as a figure, right? Then it wouldn't be worth it. I mean, I don't want to waste that kind of a time looking for someone, right? I don't want to waste any time looking for someone. And so, to scratch my own itch, I was like, okay, so what can we build to, yeah, can we build to find the best kinds of people that we want to find, right? So the ideal part, the best fit partner, so that'd be one. And then I want to, embark on challenges in the future, adventures in the future. I want to do stuff in the future where I don't have anyone in mind that would I don't have anyone in my social circle that I can think of though that I'd love to work with that person on this problem, right? So again, finding the optimal, the best fit people for the other projects I want to do in the future, for the other things I want to do in the future. Again, it's a huge chunk of my inner motivation. So yeah, it's with a lot of these kinds of problems, if you're building something to scratch your own itch, and over here you're scratching the itch of the entire humanity, right? Because people always want to be like people always want to meet would always want to meet their optimal fit people, right? The best fit people. Even if you got a rich social circle, let's say you got 10 great friends, you'd still want to, if you can have someone who's optimal, who's best fit, you'd still always find space to add them to your friend circle. Because people are always going to be social, and with the, got some thesis around, how things are going to change, around how humans are going to be more social as AGI takes over more and more of our jobs and our roles and simplifies our lives in terms of how much time we spend in admin, etc. We're going to have more and more time to pursue things like, time with friends, time with our relationships, our families, time for leisure, time for pleasure, right? So that's going to create this massive open space for being more social, for spending more time with people. And so again, skating to where the puck is, where we want to have a solution that can help us find the best fit people. So that's what I'm building. Yeah, helping people find what they're looking for in the fastest time possible, in the most delightful way. So yeah, I guess that's my motivations for what I'm currently working on. I think that's pretty much it. We went way beyond where we wanted to go.